Hey, isn't that Jenny? When I turned around at the sound of that voice while having some drink with my family at a cafe, there was my ex-husband, Tyler, standing there. Next to him was Emma, the woman who had taken him away from me. Oh. What, you got married? I just glared at him silently. Then, he said. Oh, I see. So the defective infertile one is still single, huh? Are you planning to remarry someone with children from a previous marriage? That would be quite fitting. Tyler seemed amused as he said that. I slammed the table and stood up. What? Who are you calling infertile? What, isn't it true? You're just saying that again. Tyler said this with a sneering laugh. We felt sick and left the cafe. At that moment, two girls who seemed to be daughters passed by us. Ms. Morris. One of the girls called out loudly as she ran up to me. Breathing heavily, she said. I'm Kristen, your daughter. I have something very important to tell you, Ms. Morris. She pleaded desperately. My name is Jenny Morris, 45 years old. I live with my 3-year younger husband Greg, our daughter Samantha, and my in-laws, making us a family of 5. Greg is a chef, and I work in a sort of sales job. Both of us are quite career-oriented. I sometimes wonder if we're making our 12-year-old Samantha feel a bit lonely. However, as our in-laws understand our work and treat Samantha kindly, sometimes strictly, we can focus on our jobs with peace of mind. Occasionally, on our days off together, my husband showcases his excellent cooking. Samantha envies his skills and learns cooking from him whenever there's a chance. I could never have imagined such happy days would come to me, 17 years ago. Because, for me, Greg is my second husband. I divorced 17 years ago. My ex-husband was Tyler Smith, a senior colleague who was 5 years older than me. In my 20s, I moved from sales to administration when I married him and continued working while being a housewife. At that time, I thought our marriage was mostly fine. That was, until one day, Tyler suddenly demanded a divorce. Hey, why all of a sudden? I was stunned in front of the divorce papers he presented without knowing what was happening. Then, Tyler's expression became more serious than ever before. You know, you never seem to be able to have kids, right? I was shocked. During our marriage, Tyler had never mentioned such a thing. However, my mother-in-law often urged us. Even though we lived with his parents, I was constantly nagged about having children for the 3 years of our marriage. Yet, I tried to keep it from Tyler as much as possible. I was conscious of the fact that we were unable to have children. Nonetheless, I felt that forcing fertility treatments wouldn't immediately change our situation. When it happens, it happens. That was my thought. But that was naive. Are you divorcing me because I can't have children? It's not just that. I had a bad feeling right then. Hey, do you remember Emma? Of course, I remember. Wasn't she my junior in the sales department? What about her? Just as a thought crossed my mind, Tyler spoke up. You know, Emma is pregnant with my child now. What? At that moment, I was at a loss for words. Everything came as a complete shock to me. The fact that Tyler had been cheating, and that it was with my junior, Emma. You're telling me to get a divorce because she's pregnant? I can't accept that. I argued with all my might. However, Tyler calmly responded. But Mom agrees with it. At that moment, I oddly understood where the conversation was coming from. When I asked to confirm, yes, I am supporting his relationship with Emma. My mother-in-law answered nonchalantly. Why would you do that? Doesn't that mean Tyler cheated? Can you really accept something like that? Yes, I can accept it. I was lost for words at my mother-in-law's response. Because you never seem to be able to have children. I've been worried about you all this time. That's. Perhaps she was right to be worried. From her perspective. After all, you two never said you didn't want children. So, it must be a problem with your body. Then Tyler continued. See, I told you. Mom wants to see her grandchild. And since there was no sign of that happening with you, it can't be helped, can it? Saying this, Tyler presented the divorce papers in front of me, who was dumbfounded. I quickly gave up thinking there was nowhere for me anymore, and silently received them. Looking back, I wish I had demanded a proper division of assets and compensation at that time. But I wasn't in a state to make rational decisions. At the company, the divorce and its reasons spread quickly. Meanwhile, Emma quit the company and seemed to settle into being a housewife after her pregnancy and childbirth. As for me, instead of being seen as the poor woman who was cheated on, I was rumored to be the unattractive woman whose husband had been stolen. Eventually, I quit the company. I couldn't stand the curious rumors and gazes any longer. And for a while, I spent my days holed up in a small room I moved into. But, as it happens, I still got hungry. Not being particularly good at cooking, I ventured outside on a whim. Then I was drawn to the scent of stew coming from a small shop. While I was looking at the menu for a long time, the cook's voice asked me what I'd like. It seemed I had been looking at the menu for a long time. At that moment, I realized just how tired I was feeling. While eating, I ended up crying and sniffling. However, the cook quietly continued to serve me, placing extra napkins in front of me. This cook was Greg, my current husband. After that, I started visiting this shop often and eventually began dating Greg. Even though I told him I was an older divorcee, our feelings for each other did not change, and we married relatively quickly. Soon after our marriage, I realized I was pregnant with our daughter Samantha. And unlike my previous mother-in-law, my new in-laws were very kind people. Since my family lived far away, my current in-laws, who dote on me like their own daughter, are truly a blessing to me. They also told me that if I ever feel cooped up at home and want to work, I should do so without hesitation. I started helping out at the shop where Greg worked because they were short-staffed, taking charge of the accounting part, which the owner disliked. Later, after several years, the owner fell ill and retired, and Greg, who was already admired for his skills, took over the shop. For over a decade since then, both our work and parenting went smoothly. One day, Greg, Samantha, and I were cafe hopping. It was half fun, half study for Greg and me. We were discussing things like, "This menu is nice," and "Maybe this place should reconsider their portion sizes." When it happened, "Hey, isn't that Jenny?" When I turned around at the sound of that voice, there was Tyler, a man I had almost forgotten about. And next to him, "Ah, I knew it was you, Ms. Morris. Remember me? It's Emma." A woman who, despite her age, was speaking in a coquettishly high voice. Emma was there. She must be 40 now since she was 5 years younger than me back then. Already middle-aged. Yet, she was dressed and made up in a way that seemed too youthful for her age. "It's been a while," I responded with a stiff voice. Greg and Samantha looked a bit anxious at my tone. Then Tyler pressed on. "Oh. What, you got married?" I just glared at him silently. Then he said, "Ah, I see. The infertile defect is still single, huh? Are you planning to remarry someone with children from a previous marriage?" That would be quite fitting. Tyler seemed amused by his own words. Greg and Samantha were baffled by his off-base comments. I slammed the table and stood up. "What? Who are you calling infertile?" "Oh. Miss Morris, why are you suddenly so angry? What, isn't it true? You're marrying someone with children because you can't have your own, right? What are these people on about?" I pointed to Greg and Samantha and finally said clearly, "No, you're wrong. I married this man a long time ago, and this child is mine." "Oh, come on, stop lying." Tyler said this with a dismissive laugh. I was appalled. Why does he persist in ignoring my words and insist I'm infertile? "Hey, shall we leave this place?" Greg suggested this to me. Samantha looked uneasy. "Yes, let's go." It feels bad even to be around them. Ah, so, this means a table will be free here, huh? Hey, come on over. Then a teenage girl, looking somewhat sulky, approached from the entrance. Ah, I see. This must be the child that was in Emma's belly back then. As I passed by the girl, I thought to myself, let's forget about this place and move on to the next cafe. Yes, let's enjoy our drink time properly this time. We checked the map. It was then Ms. Morris. The same girl called out loudly as she ran towards me. Breathing heavily, she said, I'm Kristen, your daughter. I have something very important to tell you, Ms. Morris. She pleaded desperately. And that was the first step that would change our fate. 6 months later, I was visiting a certain building. My destination was a company on an upper floor. Excuse me, I have an appointment with Mr. Hansen, the sales director. Thank you for waiting, Ms. Morris. The person began, then stopped, making a surprised expression. Could it be, Ms. Norman? Mr. Hansen, the sales director, called me by my maiden name. Yes, this was the company I used to work for. Yes, long time no see, Mr. Hansen. I smiled at my former boss. So, you're moving into the tenant space downstairs, then? Yes, it's my shop. Oh. Wow. Mr. Hansen was a bit overly expressive in his surprise. I'm really sorry about back then. I couldn't do anything. You were in a different department back then, Mr. Hansen. I don't think you could have stopped those tactless people. Yes, that's true. But I feel bad about the unpleasant experiences you had. I was his boss, after all. Just then, Tyler, probably back from sales rounds, entered the floor. What, why are you here? Is it because you ran into me the other day? I just silently watched Tyler, who still spoke lightly. Does he realize his boss is nearby? Hey, you're not thinking of getting back together, are you? Hey, what are you talking about? Mr. Hansen said this to calm Tyler down. At that moment, Tyler seemed to finally realize that I was with my boss. He hastily excused himself. Ms. Morris is here today for a business discussion. A business discussion? At that point, I said to the surprised Tyler. The tenant space on the first floor has been vacant for a while, right? Now that you mention it. My shop will be moving in there. Tyler made a puzzled face. Wait a minute. Isn't that famous coffee chain supposed to move in there? Right, Mr. Hansen? I turned the conversation over to Mr. Hansen. Yes, that's right. Everyone's been looking forward to that shop moving in. So what, you got a job in the sales department of that chain store? No. I paused before continuing. It's my shop, any problem? Tyler looked even more confused. Hey, Tyler, I don't know what you misunderstood, but didn't I tell you that today's visitor is Ms. Morris, the owner of that chain? The owner? Tyler exclaimed, looking back and forth between Mr. Hansen and me, sweating on his forehead. Tyler, remember, today's meeting is strictly business. Be respectful. I'm sorry, Ms. Morris. Not at all. While today is for business discussions, I actually wanted to have everyone here try our coffee. As soon as I said that, the whole floor reacted. Wait, are you treating us to coffee from that shop? The young clerk was quick to react. Yes, that's right. I hope you will become our most valued customers. Today, I would like to offer you a preview of our shop's offerings before we open. Please feel free to come down to the shop afterwards. I looked at Mr. Hansen and said, that would be fine, right? Then, he replied, indeed, I would be delighted to join. Let's all go down. Almost everyone on the floor, except those who stayed behind, headed downstairs in unison. Welcome, said the manager of the new store, greeting. The staff who had been waiting greeted the employees all at once. Please, everyone, go ahead, I said, and the employees began to take their seats with almost childish eagerness. our coffee isn't incredibly unique in itself. It's more affordable and simpler than the well-known coffee shops that pile on the toppings. Our selling points are a straightforward menu and delicious meals. We offer lunch that can be taken out if desired, and dinner for those times when you want to spend a bit more for something tasty. The success of the first store with such a menu led to the prosperity of our chain. After thriving and training our staff, we expanded our stores, and now I am the president of a coffee chain with an annual turnover of $50 million. Now, how about this table over here for you folks? I guided Mr. Hanson and Tyler to a somewhat secluded table. Then, a few people stood up there. What? Tyler inadvertently raised his voice. Wait, Kristen, why are you here? Why? Well. Kristen snorted through her nose and continued. Because today, I am also a customer. No, but isn't this place only for staff today? Tyler replied hastily. Because I'm involved today too. Oh, and by the way, Dad, my real dad is actually here too. Tyler seemed not to understand his daughter's words immediately. Kristen ignored her father's confused look and continued. Let me introduce him. This is Phil Reynolds, my real dad. Tyler looked even more perplexed. Well, you wouldn't understand, would you, Dad? We need one more guest to arrive. Saying that, Kristen looked toward the showcase. Then, beyond it, a woman hurried towards us, looking around, the same Emma who had ridiculously tried to look young when we reunited half a year ago. Emma rushed to open the door and came toward us frantically saying, Kristen, here comes another guest. Mom, this way. Kristen said calmly. Hearing her voice, Emma turned and hurried over, then her face filled with shock. Kristen. Why are you with him? Emma asked with a trembling voice. Why? Because he's also my dad. Kristen continued in a calm voice, standing before her stunned mother. Seeing the two of them, Tyler finally seemed to understand the situation. Hey, Emma, do you know something? Do you have some connection with this man? I don't know him. I don't know such a person. While shaking her head vigorously, Emma tried to flee, but Greg and I stopped her. Since you're here, how about a cup of coffee? Saying this, I offered Emma a chair and asked the staff to bring some coffee. Yes, the coffee here has been very popular lately. You really should have a cup before you go. Kristen said, practically forcing her to take a seat. What a brave young lady. I heard she is only 16 years old. Yes, that day, Kristen had chased after us to seek advice. That was because she had heard that I was once her father's wife. In the newly entered cafe, Kristen's consultation was as follows. She mentioned that someone claiming to be her real father had approached her. I've heard that Ms. Morris divorced my father because I was born. From whom? From my grandmother. My former mother-in-law. Did she really need to tell her granddaughter such things? I thought it was just like her. Have you discussed this matter with anyone else? I asked, but she replied. I haven't discussed it with anyone. Is it all right to talk about such important matters with me, almost a stranger? Didn't you consult with your mother? It's okay. I don't trust my mother, especially regarding her relationships with men. Kristen said this matter-of-factly. Because I can't trust my mother, I thought maybe this man might really be my real father. She was referring to Mr. Reynolds, who was with us at the table today. Of course, she was skeptical at first when she started talking to him. But she became convinced due to the details about gifts mentioned during their conversation. Ever since I was young, my mother would suddenly give me expensive clothes or accessories that seemed out of her reach, always on days when my father was away on business trips. When she was younger, she simply enjoyed these special gifts. But as she grew up, she started to feel that something was off. Then, during a conversation with Mr. Reynolds, she asked if he ever sent gifts. Mr. Reynolds suddenly smiled happily, asking if she had received them. Upon further questioning, he remembered the contents and timing of these gifts well. And these matched perfectly with Kristen's memories. That's why I asked for a DNA test with him. Hearing this, I thought she was a brave girl to initiate such a thing on her own. But saying such things, what do you think about your parents? I don't really care about my father. He hardly comes home, and I don't know if it's because of his job or something else. Ah, so Tyler ended up being a disinterested parent after all. He had used the fact that he wanted children as a reason to divorce me. Kristen's next words surprised me. My mother might be dating someone, I'm not sure, but there's a man she likes who isn't my father. One time, they came back together in a taxi. The irony in the young girl's voice was painful. But last time, you all came to the cafe as a family, right? That was just a show, forced family time by my father. In contrast, your family seemed genuinely happy. She said this with a sad tone. Excuse me, but are you really not her stepdaughter? Absolutely not. This child is my own. I firmly stated this while holding Samantha's back. Then at that time, my father was really rude to you, Ms. Morris. I've heard about it for a long time. Yes. In the past, your father and grandmother used that reason to force a divorce on me. But after I remarried, I immediately had this child and have been living happily ever since. I had completely forgotten about your family. Honestly, I couldn't even remember their faces right away. Is that so? I'm envious. Hearing this made me want to help her. It seemed that her family was still as twisted as ever. Over the past 6 months, as Kristen and Mr. Reynolds met again, I attended their meetings and eventually arranged this sit-down. It's really been a long time, Emma. Mr. Reynolds laughed and said, I don't know anything about you. Emma said this in a panic. Well, I have changed quite a bit. But DNA does not change. Then, Mr. Reynolds presented a DNA report to Tyler and Emma. Both of them took the report and looked at it intently. What they saw was a result showing no biological relationship between Kristen and Tyler, and a nearly 100% match with Mr. Reynolds. Realizing what this meant, Tyler suddenly looked at Emma, his face turning pale. Emma, seeing his reaction, panicked even more. No, this is a lie, it's a forgery. Mr. Reynolds responded. Then I think it would be good to test as many times as necessary. Well, I think it will be the same no matter how many times you do it. Actually, here are the results of several tests. He then casually pulled out another report, likely from a different agency. At that, Emma lunged at Kristen. What are you doing? You. What do you mean? Where did you come from today, Mom? What are you talking about? Then, Kristen rummaged through her bag, pulled out her smartphone, and after doing something, she showed the screen to Emma. I got this sent to me. Displayed on the screen were photos of Emma and another man entering a hotel and then leaving. This is a composite. It must be a composite. No, that's not the case. Mr. Reynolds said. How can you say that? You see, I'm here because I want to take this child away from you too. That's impossible. Emma shouted. It is possible if this parent-child relationship is proven. And, Tyler, can you really bear the fact that this woman has been deceiving you with another man's child? Tyler choked up. Cuckoldry, you say? Whispers started among the surrounding clerks. Yes, inviting company colleagues here was to let them hear all this commotion. Mr. Hanson came over, shushing the clerks. Tyler, what on earth is going on here? I don't understand. I would like to know myself. Sweat glistened on Tyler's forehead. But in the past, you left Ms. Morris to marry your current wife. And now, you're causing trouble at home again? That doesn't look good for someone of your status as an executive candidate. What do you mean? In his panic, Tyler frantically looked around. Suddenly, he shouted. Stop looking at me. In reality, no one was overtly staring at him. Everyone was just sneakily glancing. But for Tyler, those glimpses felt like piercing stares. What on earth is going on? What should we do? Emma said as she looked at her suddenly flustered husband, showing signs of further agitation. Well, it's about time you come forward. It's your turn. As Mr. Reynolds signaled, a man from a nearby table approached. This is the lawyer I have contracted. I am prepared to fight for the recognition and custody of this child. What do you say? Tyler was at a loss for words and froze on the spot. Mr. Reynolds continued to press him. Is there something wrong? You've been raising another man's child because of this woman. Aren't you upset about that? Yes, I am upset, but there's no child at home, and my mother. Ah, that's right. I exclaimed without thinking. You've always been weak when it comes to your mother, haven't you? The whispers around us seemed to get a little louder. The female office workers murmured that Tyler was a mama's boy. Kristen, what do you want to do? You won't betray me, your father, right? In his panic, Tyler's voice faltered, and Kristen tilted her head, pondering. Honestly, I don't really care either way. Tyler seemed genuinely shocked by her words. Perhaps he really did love his daughter in his own way. That made her words all the more painful to him. You know, I think you're just too oblivious. Not just about Mom, but about me too. What do you mean? I mean, I've been meeting with this man here for over 6 months. You didn't know anything, did you? I knew you weren't interested in me. Maybe you were too busy with work. But how could you not notice Mom's affair? What were you working for? Sweat started to bead on Tyler's forehead and trickle down his cheeks. Now, you shouldn't say things like that. It was Mr. Reynolds who calmed things down. But I understand. If I disappeared somewhere, this father wouldn't run around for me but for Grandma. You always say, you did well on your tests, Grandma will be happy, or being smart must run in our family, never mentioning anything about Mom's side. Emma turned away from her daughter with a snort. So basically, you wanted a child just for Grandma, right? What do you think? Tyler was speechless. Then Kristen looked a bit sad and said to Mr. Reynolds, See, this is the kind of person he is. At that moment, Emma suddenly shouted. Kristen! What are you saying? Dad has been working hard every day for us. The same dad you easily betray, Mom? You didn't notice either. Well, yes, I wasn't home much. And when I brought it up, Mr. Reynolds here checked it for me. Checked it? Yes. Replied the lawyer. I was hired by Mr. Reynolds to investigate your affair. We used a private detective agency and gathered solid evidence. The photos earlier are just a part of it. Oh. What a mess. Mr. Hanson sighed as he observed the chaos. Oh, what a mess. Tyler, you were competent in your sales job, but you really can't keep a family together. No, but that's not entirely my fault. Tyler's words grew fainter. Mr. Reynolds continued his pursuit. So, what will you do? As I said earlier, I am prepared to fight. As Tyler was about to reply, he suddenly collapsed. Call an ambulance. Ambulance. The room erupted into chaos. It seemed he couldn't handle all that had unfolded so suddenly. It can't be helped. Well, let's discuss this calmly later. Mr. Reynolds also suggested. Then suddenly, Emma turned to Mr. Reynolds and sneered. You've really made it, haven't you? Using lawyers and private detectives so easily. You've come a long way from back then. That's how it is. Mr. Reynolds responded matter-of-factly. Since I left you, the gold-digging curse, things have improved for me. My finances, my work, and even finding a wonderful wife. Hearing this, Emma's shoulders slumped dejectedly on the spot. Sorry for the disturbance. Please, continue at your leisure. I said this with a smile to the clerks who were eagerly watching us. Then, not long after, I heard that Tyler and Emma ended up getting divorced. Above all, Tyler's mother was furious with Emma. There were 2 reasons. One was, of course, the the fact that Emma had tricked him about the paternity, but another was that it had been discovered Tyler was infertile. This was something Tyler himself had not investigated, and it added fuel to his mother's rage. However, when the storm of this moment calmed down, he aged suddenly. Moreover, it seemed he was starting to show early signs of dementia. It became evident that he would need care. Tyler, having once stirred up family trouble in his youth and now again, was deemed incompetent in management and relegated to a minor role, as Mr. Hansen informed me. But honestly, that minor role is probably all he can handle now. Several shocks had apparently taken a toll on his mental health. Believing he was right all along, the revelation that I was not infertile, that he himself was sterile, and most painfully, that his daughter he thought he had cherished readily dismissed him. These various shocks attacked him all at once, snapping what had been his tightly wound presence in society. After the divorce, Emma tried to go to the man she had an affair with, but he desperately claimed it was a fleeting affair. He hadn't known she was married, he hadn't known her real age, and felt deceived, ultimately managing to escape her. It seems Emma had lied about being 10 years younger when having the affair. The look on the man's face when he found out her real age was enough to make one feel nauseous, I heard from the lawyer. Then, after being deserted, Emma apparently tried to rely on her parents but was rejected, and truly found herself with nowhere to go. After that, Emma's whereabouts became completely unknown. What could a woman who had been a homemaker, sneaking around her mother-in-law and cheating, really do? Well, she can just sink to wherever she falls. As for Kristen, she ended up being taken in by her biological father, Mr. Reynolds, and his wife. They begged her to live with them for even just the short time until she was an adult because Mr. Reynolds' wife had been unable to have children. Over half a year, Kristen apparently grew close to her stepmother. She is innocent in all this, so I hope she finds happiness going forward. Then, perhaps due to the commotion or not, the new store flourished regardless. And as someone who shares a little secret, we became friendly with the company upstairs. To the female office workers, the story of a divorced wife who persevered and became the president of a chain store has become somewhat of an aspiration. It feels a bit embarrassing when mentioned, but it makes me think how times have changed. And occasionally, Samantha and Kristen seem to keep in touch. It's a strange connection, but perhaps children can make friends in such unexpected ways. Despite their mothers being almost enemies, there is no relation between the children themselves. Greg also looks at them with a warm gaze. While cherishing such a family, I want to continue working well, mindful of my home, and live happily.